Have you ever been so determined to protect your child that you convinced yourself you didn't need anyone else, even the one person who might change everything? Zariah Cole woke before the alarm, as she always did. Not because she wanted to, but because the quiet scared her. The apartment was still dark, the kind of early morning hush where even the city seemed to be holding its breath. Zariah lay still for a moment, listening. The soft hum of the refrigerator. The distant sound of traffic below. Then, faint but unmistakable, the uneven rhythm of breathing from the small bedroom down the hall. She sat up instantly. "Naya," she called, already swinging her legs off the bed. No answer. Her heart tightened, not panic yet, but vigilance. The kind that never slept. Zariah crossed the apartment barefoot, her movements practiced and silent. The floor was cold. The walls were thin. Everything in this place had been chosen for function, not comfort. Affordable. Close to the bus line. Close to the clinic. She pushed the bedroom door open. Nia was curled on her side, too still. Her tiny chest rose, then hitched a shallow, uneven breath that made Zariah's stomach drop. "Hey, baby," Zariah whispered, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. Her skin was warm. Too warm. Nia's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Mommy, my chest hurts." That was it. Zariah didn't cry. She didn't freeze. She didn't pray. She moved. Within seconds, Nia was wrapped in a hoodie, shoes hastily pulled on, Zariah's bag slung over her shoulder. She locked the door behind them with shaking hands, then ran, not screaming, not calling for help, just running, like she had run through every crisis in her life. Alone, focused, silent. 7 years earlier, she had promised herself this would never happen, that she would never be the woman begging, never be the woman calling a man who had once looked at her like she was temporary, never be the woman who needed saving. But promises made in love are easy. Promises tested by a sick child are not. Across the city, in a world so far removed it might as well have been another planet, Matteo De Luca stood before a wall of glass, overlooking Milan as dawn crept across steel and stone. He hadn't slept either. His penthouse was immaculate, untouched. No photos, no warmth, just lines and space and quiet, so deep it echoed. Behind him, his assistant cleared her throat. "The board is assembled, sir." Matteo didn't turn. "Delay it," he said calmly. "They flew in from." "I said delay it." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Mr. De Luca." When the door closed, Matteo finally exhaled. He pressed his palm against the glass, watching the city wake beneath him. Somewhere below, lives were unfolding, messy, loud, complicated lives. He envied them more than he liked to admit. At 38, Matteo had everything the world admired. A tech empire, generational wealth, influence that bent governments. But there were gaps in his life he had learned not to examine too closely. Empty spaces that hurt if he stared too long. One of them had a name. Zariah. He hadn't spoken it aloud in years. The last time he'd seen her, she was standing in the rain outside his apartment, eyes blazing, voice shaking as she told him she was done being an afterthought in a life ruled by contracts and schedules. He had let her walk away. Pride had felt like strength back then. Now it felt like rot. Matteo's phone buzzed on the glass beside his hand. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. Something about the persistence made his jaw tighten. He picked it up. "Mr. De Luca," a woman's voice said, professional but strained. "This is St. Helena Medical Center. We have a patient here, a minor, and your name was listed as an emergency contact." The world shifted. "I don't have children," Matteo said flatly. There was a pause. Papers rustled. "Sir?" The mother insisted. His heart began to pound, slow and heavy, like something waking from sleep. "What is the mother's name?" he asked. Another pause, longer this time. Zariah Cole. The glass beneath his palm felt suddenly fragile. For the first time in years, Matteo De Luca felt something crack. At the hospital, Zariah sat rigid in a plastic chair, Nia asleep against her chest, Fräulein taped to her tiny arm. The doctor had said stabilized, not safe. Zariah clung to that word like a lifeline. Her phone lay in her lap. One missed call. Unknown number. Her throat tightened. She already knew. She didn't want to look up when she felt the shift in the room, the subtle ripple that came with power entering a space. But instinct betrayed her. Their eyes met. 7 years vanished. Matteo stood frozen near the entrance, impeccably dressed, completely undone. His gaze moved from her face to the child in her arms, the curve of Nia's cheek, the fall of her curls. Something ancient and terrifying flickered in his eyes. "Zariah," he said quietly. She swallowed. "You shouldn't be here." He took a step closer, voice rough. "Then why am I?" She had no answer. Not yet. And sitting between them, breathing softly against Zariah's chest, was the truth that would destroy everything they thought they had survived. If you were forced to face the one person who once broke you, would you protect your heart, or tell the truth and risk everything? The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, a smell that clung to fear. Zariah adjusted Nia's blanket for the third time in 5 minutes, even though it didn't need adjusting. Anything to avoid looking at him again. Mateo stood near the foot of the bed, hands clasped loosely in front of him, posture controlled, but his eyes kept drifting back to the child. Too often, too intensely. "Is she?" he started, then stopped himself. "Is she going to be okay?" Zariah nodded once. "She's stable. Asthma attack. Severe." Mateo exhaled, slow and careful, as if afraid a full breath might shatter something. "She looks young." "She's 6, Zariah replied quickly. Too quickly. Silence settled between them, heavy and awkward. Mateo shifted his weight, eyes flicking back to Nia's face. There was something about her, something familiar in the slope of her nose, the stubborn curve of her mouth, even in sleep. He frowned slightly, unsettled. "She has your eyes," he said without thinking. Zariah stiffened. "They're brown," she said. "A lot of people have brown eyes." Mateo nodded, embarrassed. "Of course." Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't know who else to call," Zariah said finally, the words scraping her throat on the way out. "The hospital needed authorization. Insurance complications." He looked at her, then really looked. The tired shadows beneath her eyes. The way her shoulders never fully relaxed, even sitting down. This wasn't the woman he remembered laughing barefoot in his kitchen, hair wrapped in a silk scarf, teasing him for burning pasta. This woman carried weight. "You could have called anyone," he said softly. "I don't have anyone," she replied. The words landed harder than she intended. Mateo's jaw tightened. "You had me." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Did I?" That hit its mark. Mateo flinched, then straightened. "Zariah, I know I wasn't perfect, but disappearing without a word." "I didn't disappear," she snapped, then stopped herself. Lowered her voice. "I left because I had to." "You could have told me," he said. She looked down at Nia, fingers curling into the fabric of her daughter's hoodie. "You wouldn't have listened." Mateo opened his mouth, then closed it again. Maybe she was right. A nurse knocked lightly and entered, checking the monitors. Nia stirred, eyelids fluttering open. "Mommy," she murmured. "I'm here, baby," Zariah whispered instantly, brushing her thumb across Nia's cheek. Nia's gaze drifted, then landed on Mateo. She stared. Children didn't have filters. They didn't know when not to look. "Who's that?" Nia asked, voice small but clear. Zariah's chest tightened. "That's the friend." Mateo swallowed. "Hello," he said gently, crouching slightly so he wasn't towering. "I'm Mateo." Nia studied him with unnerving seriousness. "You're tall." A corner of his mouth twitched despite himself. "So I've been told." "You smell nice," she added. Zariah shot him a warning look. Mateo lifted his hands slightly in surrender, but there was something else now, something soft creeping into his expression. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nia," she said. "But Mommy calls me Sunshine." Something twisted painfully in Mateo's chest. "That's a good name," he said. Nia yawned. "Can you stay? I don't like when Mommy looks scared." Zariah froze. She hadn't realized Nia noticed. Mateo glanced at Zariah, surprise and something like protectiveness flickering in his eyes. "If it's okay with your mom, I can stay a bit." Zariah hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. Distance. Boundaries. Control. But Nia's fingers tightened in her sleeve. "Please," Nia whispered. Zariah nodded once. For a little while. Mateo pulled up a chair. And just like that, the wall Zariah had built cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to let something dangerous seep through. Hours passed. Nia drifted in and out of sleep. Mateo didn't leave. He fetched water. Spoke quietly with doctors. Made calls in low tones that somehow smoothed bureaucratic nightmares away without fanfare. He didn't flaunt his power. He just used it. Zariah noticed. She hated that she noticed. You didn't have to do all this, she said finally, watching him end a call. I wanted to, he replied simply. She scoffed. You always say that when it's convenient. Mateo met her gaze, unflinching. And you always assume the worst when you're afraid. The words stung because they were true. Nia shifted again, mumbling something incoherent. Mateo smiled without thinking a real smile, unguarded. Zariah saw it. Her breath caught. For a terrifying second, she imagined a different life. One where things hadn't broken. One where she hadn't carried everything alone. She crushed the thought immediately. Once she's discharged, Zariah said carefully, we'll be out of your way. Mateo turned to her. Why does it have to be that? Because this, she gestured vaguely between them, isn't real. He stood slowly. It feels real to me. She laughed softly, bitter. That's the problem. Before he could respond, a doctor entered with a clipboard. Ms. Cole, she said, we need to discuss long-term management. Her condition is complicated. Zariah's stomach dropped. Mateo watched her face drain of color. I'll step out, he said. No, Zariah said suddenly, surprising them both. Stay. The doctor glanced between them. Are you family? Zariah's throat closed. Mateo answered before she could stop him. I'm involved. The doctor nodded and continued speaking. Zariah barely heard the words. All she could feel was the weight of 7 years pressing against her ribs, secrets, sacrifices, nights crying silently so her daughter wouldn't hear. She looked at Mateo. He was listening intently, concern etched into every line of his face. Protective, focused, present. This was the man she hadn't trusted enough to tell the truth. And sitting between them was the living proof of that choice. When the doctor left, Zariah sank back into her chair, exhausted. Mateo hesitated, then spoke quietly. There's something you're not telling me. She closed her eyes. Please, he added. Don't lie to me again. Her heart hammered. Not yet, she thought. Not like this. But fate had already started its work. And the spark had been lit. The hospital room felt smaller the longer Mateo stayed. Zariah noticed it in the way her shoulders never fully relaxed, in how her thoughts kept circling the same forbidden truths. She'd spent 7 years mastering distance, emotional, physical, intentional. Now it was collapsing under fluorescent lights and the steady beep of a heart monitor. Nia slept again, her breaths deeper now, steadier. Zariah watched her chest rise and fall, counting without realizing she was counting. 1, 2, 3. You do that when you're anxious. Zariah stiffened. Do what? Count, Mateo said gently. You used to count when you thought I wasn't listening. She looked up at him, annoyed that he remembered. People change. Yes, he said. They do. The way he said it made her think he meant himself. She stood abruptly. I'm going to get some air. I'll stay, he said, already moving closer to the bed. In case she wakes. Zariah hesitated. Every instinct screamed to take Nia with her, to keep them apart. But exhaustion won. Don't let her pull the 4, she said, then paused. She hates the tape. Mateo smiled faintly. I'll be careful. Out in the hallway, Zariah leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her pulse raced like she'd just run miles instead of a few steps. You're losing control, she told herself. She pressed her palms into her eyes until she saw stars. This was temporary, just a crisis. Once Nia was discharged, she'd disappear again. That was the plan. It had to be. Inside the room, Nia stirred. Mateo leaned forward instinctively, lowering his voice. Hey, sunshine. Her eyes opened slowly. You stayed. I said I would. She studied him again, brow furrowed. Do you have kids? The question hit him harder than expected. No, he said quietly. Why not? He considered lying, then decided against it. I didn't know how. She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Mommy says grown-ups mess things up when they're scared. A painful smile tugged at his mouth. Your mommy is very wise. Nia yawned. She's strong. I can see that. Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm asleep, Nia added matter-of-factly. Mateo's chest tightened. What do you do? I pretend to sleep harder, Nia said. So she doesn't feel bad. Something in Mateo broke quietly, internally, without spectacle. You shouldn't have to do that, he murmured. Nia shrugged. It's okay. She does everything for me. Mateo looked at her small hand curled around the blanket, the faint bruise near her wrist from the 4. No one should have to do everything alone. When Zariah returned, She stopped short at the sight of them. Mateo, seated close, Nia's fingers loosely hooked around his sleeve. Nia looked peaceful. Safe. A dangerous word. Mommy, Nia said softly. Mateo says he's good at staying. Zariah's breath caught. He says a lot of things. Mateo straightened, letting Nia's hand go immediately. I'll give you space. No, Zariah said quickly. Too quickly. It's fine. The lie sat between them. You don't have to protect me from her, Mateo said. Or her from me. Zariah crossed her arms. You don't know what you're talking about. Then help me understand, he said. She shook her head. Understanding doesn't change the past. It can change the future. That's easy to say when you're used to options, she snapped. I didn't have any. Mateo's eyes darkened. You always assume I would have walked away. Wouldn't you have? She asked, voice trembling despite her effort. A baby. With me. In the middle of your empire building. He took a step closer. You didn't give me the chance to answer that. Her jaw clenched. Because I knew the answer. They stood there, breath shallow, the space between them crackling with unsaid things. Nia shifted, sensing the tension. Zariah softened instantly, turning back to her daughter. I'm okay, Mommy, Nia whispered. Zariah kissed her forehead. I know. Mateo watched the exchange, something dawning slowly, painfully, in his expression. You've been doing this alone, he said quietly. Haven't you? Zariah didn't answer. Silence was her armor. Later that evening, paperwork piled up. Doctors came and went. Mateo took a call in the hallway, his voice low and controlled, but his eyes kept drifting back through the glass toward the room. 7 years. 7 years he couldn't get back. When he returned, Zariah was packing Nia's small bag. They're keeping her overnight, she said without looking at him. Observation. I'll book a hotel nearby, he said. In case. No. The word came out sharp. This isn't your responsibility, she continued, calmer now. You helped. Thank you. That's enough. It doesn't feel like enough, he replied. She finally looked at him, really looked, and for a split second, her guard slipped. You don't get to feel that, she said softly. Not after all this time. Mateo absorbed the blow, nodding slowly. Then tell me what I get to feel. She turned away. He didn't push. But the distance between them had changed shape. It was no longer absence. It was resistance. And it was exhausting. The night stretched long and thin, like a held breath that refused to release. Zariah sat curled into the stiff hospital chair beside Nia's bed, her spine aching, her eyes burning from exhaustion. The monitors hummed softly, steady and relentless. Every beep felt like a reminder that she was still on alert. Always on alert. Mateo stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low Italian she hadn't heard in years. The language used to feel intimate, something he shared with her late at night, murmured against her skin. Now it felt like a wall. He ended the call and turned toward her. The weather's turning bad, he said. They've grounded most flights. She nodded, uninterested. Okay. There's also a conference in the city tomorrow, he continued carefully. All hotels within walking distance are booked. She looked up sharply. That's not my problem. I know, he said quickly. I'm just saying. You can go back to your penthouse, she cut in. This isn't your life. He studied her for a moment, then surprised her by sitting down in the chair across from her instead of arguing. You're right, he said quietly. It isn't. The admission disarmed her more than any defense would have. But she is, he added, glancing at Nia. Zariah's throat tightened. A nurse entered then, flipping through a chart. Ms. Cole, we're short-staffed tonight. If anything changes, you'll need to alert us immediately. Zariah nodded. I won't sleep. The nurse gave her a sympathetic look. You should try. When the door closed, Mateo spoke again. I'll stay awake. You don't have to. I want to. Silence settled, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was cautious. Hours passed in fragments, Nia stirring, Zariah adjusting blankets, Mateo fetching water without being asked. At some point, the city outside faded into darkness, rain streaking down the windows in thin silver lines. Zariah's head dipped forward before she realized she was losing the fight. She jerked awake minutes later, embarrassed. Mateo had stood and draped his jacket gently over her shoulders. I said you didn't have to. You didn't wake, he replied softly. I didn't want to. Her fingers curled instinctively into the fabric. Warm. Expensive. Familiar. Dangerous. She didn't give it back. Around 3 a.m., Nia woke coughing. Zariah was on her feet instantly, heart racing. Mateo was already there, pressing the call button, his voice calm and clear as he explained what was happening. Zariah watched him in a daze. He didn't panic. He didn't bark orders. He didn't retreat. He stayed. When the coughing eased and Nia fell back asleep, Zariah sagged against the bed, shaking now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. Mateo hovered nearby, unsure if he was allowed to touch her. "I can't do this again," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I can't lose her." "You won't," he said. "You don't know that." "I know fear," he replied. "And I know when it lies." She laughed weakly. "You always thought you knew everything." "I thought I could control everything," he corrected. "I was wrong." That caught her attention. He leaned back against the wall, eyes distant. "After you left, I told myself it was for the best. That love was a distraction. That I was stronger alone. And," she asked quietly, "and I built an empire around that lie." Her chest tightened. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the billionaire, not the man who had once shattered her, but someone worn thin by regret. "You hurt me," she said, "and I didn't trust you not to do it again." "I know," he said, "but I wish you'd trusted me enough to let me try to do better." She closed her eyes. Trust was a luxury she hadn't allowed herself. Dawn crept in slowly, pale light spilling across the room. Nia woke smiling this time. "Mommy, the sun's up." Zariah smiled back, brushing her hair. "Yeah, sunshine." Nia's gaze shifted to Mateo. "You're still here." He smiled. "I told you I was good at staying." Zariah's breath hitched at the word. Staying. The doctor arrived later with updates, outlining next steps, long-term care, adjustments that would change everything. Zariah listened, nodding, absorbing each word like another weight added to her shoulders. When the doctor left, Mateo spoke. "You don't have to do this alone." She shook her head automatically. "I've been doing it alone. And it's been killing you," he said gently. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Because he was right. For the first time in years, she didn't feel strong. She felt tired. "Just for now," she said finally. "While she's here." His eyes softened. "That's enough." They sat together as morning fully arrived, the space between them no longer empty, but filled with fragile understanding. Neither of them said the truth out loud, but it was there, breathing, waiting. "When you're ready, say continue Act 5. That's where the past finally refuses to stay buried." Morning didn't bring relief. It brought memory. Zariah watched the sun creep higher through the narrow hospital window, light settling over the bed where Nia slept, peaceful now in a way that felt borrowed. Mateo stood at the sink, rinsing out a coffee cup he hadn't finished. The ordinary domesticity of the moment felt surreal, like a life she'd almost had. Almost. "I'm going to get breakfast," he said quietly. "Do you want anything?" She shook her head. "I'm not hungry." He nodded, already used to that answer, and stepped out. The door clicked shut, and just like that, the silence turned sharp. Zariah's gaze drifted to her bag on the floor. She knew exactly what was inside: folded medical documents, old appointment slips, records she'd memorized by heart. Proof of a life lived in fragments and waiting rooms. Proof she had never planned to share. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from an unknown number. "I'm downstairs. I won't come back up unless you ask." She closed her eyes. Even now, he gave her a choice. That was the cruelest part. When Mateo returned, Zariah was standing by the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "There's something you need to know," she said before he could speak. He set the food down slowly. "Okay." She didn't turn around. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." His breath caught, just barely. "I left because I was pregnant." The words hung in the air, fragile and irreversible. Mateo didn't move. "I found out 2 weeks after that night," she continued, voice steady only because she refused to let it shake. "I tried to reach you. Your assistant told me you were in Zurich, then Tokyo, then unavailable. I was closing a deal he started, then stopped himself. That's not an excuse." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." She finally turned to face him, tears shining but not falling. "I was scared, Mateo. Not of you, of becoming invisible. Of being an option you could choose or discard depending on your schedule." He swallowed hard. "My mother raised me alone," she went on. "She taught me that if you wait for someone to choose you, you might wait forever. So you chose for me," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. And I hate myself for it. Mateo sat down heavily, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together as if in prayer. You should have told me. I wanted to, she whispered. Every day. She reached into her bag then, fingers trembling as she pulled out a worn envelope. These are her records, she said, placing it gently on the table between them. And this. She hesitated, then slid a photograph across. Mateo picked it up. A newborn, swaddled in white. Dark curls. A tiny fist raised near her face. His face. He sucked in a sharp breath, eyes burning. You named her Nia, he said hoarsely. It means purpose, Zariah replied. Because she saved me. Tears finally spilled down his cheeks, unguarded, unstoppable. I missed everything, he said. Her first steps. Her first word. Zariah's voice broke. I never wanted you to feel this. And yet, he said softly, here we are. They didn't notice Nia wake at first. Mommy. Zariah spun around instantly. Hey, baby. Nia looked between them, sensing the shift. Why are you both sad? Zariah knelt beside the bed, heart pounding. This was not how she planned this moment. Not now. Not here. Mateo moved closer too, cautious but present. There's something we should tell you, Zariah said gently. Nia frowned. Am I in trouble? No, Mateo said quickly. Never. Zariah took a breath. Mateo isn't just Mommy's friend. Nia tilted her head. Is he like Uncle James? Zariah's throat closed. He's your father, she whispered. The word felt enormous. Nia stared at Mateo. You're my dad. Mateo dropped to one knee beside the bed, eyes level with hers. Yes, he said, voice shaking. If you want me to be. Nia considered this carefully. Do dads leave? She asked. Mateo's heart shattered completely. Sometimes, he admitted. But I won't. She studied his face, then nodded once, solemn. Okay, just like that. Zariah covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Nia smiled faintly. Can you come to my school when I'm better? Mateo laughed through tears. Every day, if you'll let me. She yawned. Cool. And fell asleep again. When the moment passed, the weight of it crashed down on all of them. You should hate me, Mateo said quietly to Zariah. I did, she replied. For a long time. And now? She wiped her cheeks. Now I'm just tired of carrying this alone. He nodded. Then don't. The past had been spoken. The truth was finally in the open. And nothing would ever be the same again. For the first time since the truth came out, the room felt lighter. Not healed, not even close, but lighter, like a storm that had finally decided to rain instead of hovering. Nia was transferred to a quieter recovery wing later that afternoon. The windows were bigger there. The walls painted a soft, hopeful yellow. Mateo insisted on carrying the small overnight bag, even though it barely weighed anything. Zariah watched him as they walked beside the gurney, his hand hovering near the rails like he didn't quite know where to place himself yet. Learning how to belong. When they settled into the new room, Nia looked between them with a sleepy smile. It's like a sleepover. Zariah laughed softly. A very boring one. I like boring, Nia said. Boring means safe. The word landed heavy in both adults' chests. Later, when Nia fell asleep again, Mateo stepped out to take a call. Zariah remained by the window, watching the city pulse below alive, indifferent, endless. When he returned, he didn't sit right away. I cleared my schedule, he said. She turned sharply. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. He replied, then corrected himself. I need to. She studied his face. There was no performance there. No grand gesture. Just resolve. I don't want you doing this out of guilt, she said. I'm not, he answered. I'm doing it because I missed 7 years. And because I don't want to miss another hour. Her defenses wavered. That kind of promise scares me, she admitted. Because what happens when reality gets heavy again? He met her gaze steadily. Then I stay anyway. Silence stretched, not tense this time, but thoughtful. You know, Zariah said quietly, she gets scared of thunder. He smiled faintly. I used to be scared of the dark. Really? My mother used to leave the hallway light on, he said. Said even strong men need reminders they're not alone. Something warm bloomed between them. Zariah sat down slowly. She loves astronomy. Knows all the planets. Then she's already smarter than me, he said. She smiled, a real one, and didn't hide it. That evening, they shared takeout eaten from plastic containers, sitting on opposite sides of the bed while Nia watched cartoons with half-lidded eyes. Mommy, Nia murmured. Did you and Daddy love each other before? Zariah froze. Mateo looked at her, then back at Nia. Yes, he said carefully. We did. Do you still? The question hung in the air like a held breath. Zariah answered honestly. Love doesn't always disappear, baby. Sometimes it just gets hurt. Nia nodded. Can it get better? Mateo's voice was gentle. If people are brave. Nia smiled sleepily. Then you should be brave. And with that, she drifted off. Zariah stared at the ceiling. She has a way of doing that. Cutting straight through, Mateo agreed. As night settled again, they found themselves sitting closer, not touching, but aware. I used to imagine this, Mateo admitted quietly. Not this hospital room, but being here. With you. With her. Zariah swallowed. I imagined you leaving when it got hard. I know, he said. I gave you reasons to believe that. She turned toward him. I don't want a fantasy, Mateo. I want consistency. You'll have it, he said. Even if it takes me a lifetime to prove it. Her eyes burned. Don't rush me, she whispered. I don't know how to trust you yet. I won't, he promised. I'll wait. And for the first time, she believed he might mean it. Near midnight, Zariah dozed off against the headboard. She woke briefly to the sensation of something warm settling over her shoulders. A blanket this time, not a jacket. Mateo sat nearby, reading on his phone, glasses perched low on his nose. She watched him through half-closed eyes. This man could leave. He could still walk away. But he hadn't. And that scared her more than anything. Because hope, once let in, was the hardest thing to survive losing again. The call came just after sunrise. Mateo stepped into the hallway to answer it. His voice low, controlled the voice he used when the world expected certainty from him. Zariah watched through the glass, half awake, Nia still asleep between them. She didn't hear the words. She saw the change. His shoulders stiffened. His jaw clenched. One hand slid into his hair in a way she remembered too well. When he came back inside, the warmth he'd carried for 2 days was gone. What is it? She asked immediately. Mateo didn't answer right away. He looked at Nia first, then back at Zariah. My mother knows. Zariah's stomach dropped. Knows what? About Nia, he said. About everything. Her pulse thundered. How? The hospital records, he replied, jaw tight. My name was flagged as legal father. It triggered notifications. And you didn't think to tell me? She snapped. I just found out, he said sharply, then softened. She's on her way here. Zariah stood. No. Absolutely not. She wants to meet her granddaughter. She doesn't get to want anything, Zariah shot back. Not after 7 years of silence. Mateo's eyes flashed. She didn't know. She knew about me, Zariah said. And she made it clear where I stood. That hit something raw. You're not invisible anymore, Mateo said. Your family. Zariah laughed bitterly. That's easy to say now that it's convenient. His voice hardened. This isn't about convenience. It's about responsibility. And where was that responsibility when I was choosing between rent and medication? She demanded. When I was holding my baby at 3 a.m. wondering if she'd stop breathing? The words sliced clean. Mateo's face drained of color. You think I wouldn't have helped? I know you would have, she said, and that was worse. But I also know you would have taken over. Lawyers. NDAs. Control. That's unfair, he said. So is rewriting my life without my consent, she shot back. Nia stirred. Both of them froze. Mommy, she murmured, eyes fluttering open. Why are you yelling? Zariah's heart cracked. She rushed to the bed. We're not yelling, baby. Mateo stepped back, guilt flooding his face. But the damage was done. An hour later, Mateo's mother arrived. Elegant, composed, impeccably dressed, and kind, devastatingly kind. Oh, she breathed when she saw Nia. She's beautiful. Zariah stood stiffly at the foot of the bed. She looks like Mateo, the woman continued softly. But her eyes, those are yours. Zariah said nothing. I wish I had known, the woman added. I would have helped. Zariah finally met her gaze. With respect, you would have helped on your terms. Silence fell. Mateo stepped in. This isn't the time. No, Zariah said. This is exactly the time. She turned to Mateo, voice shaking but steady. This is why I didn't tell you. Because once the truth came out, my life stopped being mine. That's not what I want, he said desperately. But it's what's happening, she replied. Nia watched them quietly, too perceptive for her age. Daddy, she said softly. Mateo knelt instantly. Yes, sunshine. Are you leaving? The question destroyed him. No, he said, voice breaking. Never. Zariah swallowed hard. Then she made the choice that shattered everything. You can't stay, she said quietly. Mateo looked up at her. What? This isn't healthy, she continued. Not for her. Not for me. You don't mean that. I do. She lied and they both knew it. She picked up Nia's hand. We're going home after discharge. Alone. Mateo stood slowly, devastation written across his face. You're punishing me. I'm protecting her, Zariah said. And what about me? He asked. She looked away. You'll survive. That was the moment. The bond didn't break loudly. It shattered silently into pieces neither of them knew how to put back together. Later that night, Mateo packed his things. He didn't say goodbye. Zariah watched the door long after it closed. Her chest felt hollow. Because even as she convinced herself she was doing the right thing, she had never felt more alone. Silence can be louder than shouting. Zariah felt it settle into the apartment the first night back home, heavy, suffocating, unforgiving. The walls looked the same. The couch still sagged in the middle. Nia's shoes sat by the door, one tipped on its side like it had been kicked off in a hurry. Everything was familiar, and everything felt wrong. Nia moved through the space quietly, dragging her stuffed rabbit behind her. She didn't ask where Mateo was. She didn't cry. That worried Zariah more than anything. At bedtime, Zariah tucked her in, smoothing the blanket the way she always did. Mommy, Nia asked softly. Yes, sunshine. Did I do something bad? Zariah's heart broke clean in two. No, she said instantly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Never. You did nothing wrong. Then why did Daddy leave? The word daddy still felt new. Fragile. Zariah swallowed. Sometimes grown-ups get scared and make mistakes. Like you, Nia asked gently. The honesty of children was brutal. Zariah's eyes burned. Yes, she whispered. Like me. Nia reached out, placing her small hand over Zariah's chest. Your heart is loud. Zariah laughed weakly through tears. That's because it loves you so much. And Daddy, Nia added. Zariah didn't correct her. She couldn't. Across the city, Mateo stood alone in his penthouse, the silence there even sharper. For the first time, the space felt obscene. Too big. Too empty. He replayed every word, every expression, every moment he could have chosen differently. He had built his life on control and lost the one thing that required surrender. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother. You cannot fix this with power. Only patience. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he opened another message unsent. Zariah's name hovered at the top. He typed. Deleted. Typed again. I'm sorry felt too small. I'll fight for her felt like pressure. I love you felt unfair. He closed the phone. For once, doing nothing felt like the most respectful choice. Days passed. Nia returned to school. Zariah returned to work. Life resumed its rhythm, but it limped. Zariah found herself reaching for her phone at odd moments. When Nia laughed. When a bill came in the mail. When the city lights flickered on at dusk. She hated herself for missing him. One evening, Nia came home quiet again. Did something happen at school? Zariah asked gently. Nia hesitated. Everyone had someone at family day. Zariah's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten. Were you okay? She asked carefully. Nia nodded. I told them my daddy is learning how to stay. The words undid her. That night, Zariah sat alone long after Nia fell asleep, staring at the darkened window. She thought of the man who had stayed up all night watching monitors, who had waited instead of demanding, who had walked away when she asked even though it tore him apart. She had been protecting herself for so long she forgot to ask the harder question. What if letting him in doesn't destroy me, but saves us? Her phone buzzed softly. One message. From Mateo. I will respect whatever you decide. But if there's ever a moment you need me for her, or for you, I'll be there. No conditions. Zariah pressed her fingers to her lips. This time, she didn't delete the reply. The next morning, she stood outside a small cafe near Nia's school, the one Mateo used to love, the one he once claimed had the best espresso outside Italy. He was already there. Not pacing. Not watching the door. Waiting. When he saw her, he didn't stand immediately. He didn't rush her. He simply met her eyes. She took a breath. I was wrong. He stayed silent. I thought keeping control meant keeping us safe, she continued. But all I did was teach my daughter that love leaves. His voice was gentle. You were protecting her the only way you knew how. I don't want to do it alone anymore, she said, tears slipping free. But I need to really know that you'll choose us even when it's hard. Mateo stood then, slowly. I'm not asking to be forgiven all at once, he said. I'm asking for the chance to earn it. She nodded. That's all I can give. He smiled small, reverent. It's enough. For the first time, the choice wasn't driven by fear. It was driven by hope. The first thing Mateo did wasn't move into Zariah's life. He adjusted himself to it. He learned Nia's school schedule, not to interfere, but to fit around it. He attended parent-teacher meetings quietly, sitting in the back, letting Zariah lead. He showed up for doctor's appointments without fanfare, listening more than speaking. Consistency replaced grand gestures. Zariah noticed. She noticed how he never undermined her decisions, how he asked instead of assumed, how he waited for permission before stepping into moments that mattered. Trust didn't return in a rush. It crept back slowly. One evening, weeks later, a storm rolled in hard and sudden. Thunder cracked overhead. Nia froze mid-step, eyes wide. Mommy. Zariah was already reaching for her when Mateo knelt instead, keeping his voice calm. It's okay, sunshine. I'm here. Nia hesitated, then ran into his arms. Zariah watched from the doorway, heart pounding, as Mateo held their daughter through the thunder, whispering softly in Italian, steady and unafraid. The hallway light stayed on. Zariah covered her mouth. In that moment, she understood something vital. He wasn't trying to replace her strength. He was supporting it. Later that night, when Nia slept peacefully, Zariah and Mateo sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them no longer empty, just careful. I used to think love was something you either had or lost, Zariah said quietly. Now I think it's something you choose again and again. Mateo nodded. And sometimes earn back. She smiled faintly. You're earning it. He looked at her, eyes warm but grounded. I'll keep earning it. Silence stretched, comfortable, honest. Then she shifted closer. Just an inch. He didn't touch her. That mattered. Months passed. Laughter returned to the apartment. Shoes by the door multiplied. The walls felt warmer. One afternoon, Nia burst into the kitchen waving a crayon drawing. Look, it was 3 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one with curls, one with a dress. What do you think? Nia asked. Zariah crouched beside her. I think it's beautiful. Mateo swallowed. Is that me? Nia nodded proudly. You stayed. The simplest truth. The moment Zariah allowed herself to fall again came quietly. Not in passion, not in drama, but in the mundane. She was sick with the flu, barely able to stand. Mateo handled dinner, homework, bedtime, everything without asking for praise. When she woke at midnight to find him asleep in a chair beside her bed, jacket still on, she felt something finally settle in her chest. Safety. She touched his shoulder gently. He stirred, eyes opening instantly. You didn't leave, she whispered. I told you, he said softly. I'm good at staying. She leaned down and kissed him slow, deliberate, unafraid. This time, he didn't pull her into promises. He simply held her like something precious. A year later, they stood in the same hospital where everything began. But this time, the air was light. Nia raced down the hall, healthy and laughing. Mateo and Zariah followed, hands brushing, then intertwining without thought. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I am now. They paused by the window where fear had once lived. Funny, Zariah said. The worst day of my life led me back to you. Mateo squeezed her hand. And the best reason to stay. Nia ran back to them, slipping her hands into theirs. Come on, she said. We're a family. Families walk together. They did. Not perfect, not unscarred, but whole. If this story moved you, ask yourself, would you choose love again even after it broke you once? Leave a comment. Your story matters too.